Is it a bittersweet situation, even though the acquisition is going smooth 6 months later and life is good?
It was not what I thought. There's few people you can talk to about it, right? When you're going through the actual thing, it's a really lonely spot because there's no pity from anybody outside. You're on the edge of your seat the entire time while trying to pull documents together, while still doing a myriad of negotiations. And in parallel, your entire company can't really know about that because that's going to impact their morale if things don't go well. Your sales team is going to quit the next day. So you actually have to purposefully shield the team, and then you have to, as a single individual, like manage the day-to-day of the company, but then also all those negotiations. Your legal counsel becomes your therapist because they're the only ones that actually know what's happening. There was a couple moments I would call them up and I'd be like, oh, I don't even want this anymore, right?
So I have to ask, do you believe that physicians have a competitive advantage when it comes to designing and building medical devices?
I think the physician taken in isolation has that deeper knowledge of the clinical needs and maybe even some of the human factors components, right? Because they understand the workflow in the operating room. They understand ergonomics a little bit more than an engineer that would have to reference other folks, right? But I think a lot of that knowledge stops where the engineer really needs to pick up.
Nothing prepares you in medical school for business,
right,
or running a company.
The school of hard knocks, right? Literally, I was very fortunate enough to have folks that were founders that sat on my board of directors that gave me that mentorship. One of the people that's a dear friend that sat on my board is Don Gonzalez, an ear, nose, and throat doctor, sold 3 companies. I met him when he had just closed the Series A on his first company, and he disclosed to me, I'm not sure what to do next. And then all these years later, like his last company exited to Stryker for $500 million. Very quickly after I started the company, my first hire was somebody that was older than me and was more experienced in the MedTech space than me. At no point in the company did I ever say, I know more than this person that I hired or this other consultant or things like that. My goal and my style was I just want to surround myself with people that do their job and do it really well because I can't do that job, right? I have a broader vision of what the technology should look like, how it should work, and the clinical application feeding on the clinician side of me. But all the FDA documentation, all the human factors engineering studies, like all the formal things like that, I brought in the people that I knew are going to do that better than I ever could.
How did you even start and learn about the fundraising game?
Anytime I heard some new term or some new phrase or some new investment vehicle, I went and read about it. And I always focused on asking other people, what have you done and why, right? And that's how I go about life. I never say I know it all. It's like I've learned it from all these other people and little bits and pieces from everybody else.
Would you say it's a game of trial and error?
I think just like life, it is a game of trial and error, but your goal is to always minimize those and always have a plan B, plan C, and maybe even a plan D in place. That first round was $350,000, and it was the hardest earned $350,000 I've ever made in the company. But then I said, okay, if I apply and if I get into the Y Combinator like we did, that I can use to bring in a little bit more capital as like a bridge round, right? Because there will be investors that say, hey, I wasn't sure about it before, but if they believe in you, then I'll throw some money at it.
You started at TMC, Y Combinator. Mm-hmm. You also graduated from MedTech Innovator. Would you recommend entrepreneurs to heavily consider accelerators?
I think about every move being purposeful, right? To go through Texas Medical Center's accelerator. That provided me the foundation of knowledge, put me around other startups so I could understand what is this new world that I'm now entering into. Then I took a step back at that point and thought about, okay, what are the things that are needed to get a small startup that nobody knows about a level of awareness on a national level, right? To advance the company forward in a meaningful way. And there's 2 things, right? Your acquirers need to know you exist. So industry needs to know you exist. And so in those 2 buckets, MedTech Innovator is the best way and at 0 equity. And then Y Combinator was a vehicle and a tool to help you build a very strong Bay Area network, but also to help you raise funding. YC is great at helping give you investor awareness.
How important is selection of good industry partners for a startup?
I think it always helps, right? Because you're always looking to build your network and increase your visibility. Without network, I wouldn't have met any of the people. Even my VP of sales was the VP of sales for my friend's company, and when they exited, she called me and said, hey, this guy is available. Like, I've gone through 5 of these folks before, and he's the real deal. And then so it's pieces like that that you always just have to have an ear out for. And all the other startup founders that I talk about is like fundraising and money. Folks that have the capability to open up big checkbooks, they need to see more wins. The more allotropes there are, the more like volumetrics there are, things like that, then it's going to be de-risked in their mind, and they're going to feel like, okay, like this is another thing that I can put some opportunities into instead of buying another car maybe.
Given the fact that you started and took it to the end, R&D, clinical stages, commercial stages,
Yeah.
what's the most challenging?
Commercial was a completely different beast. I think it's also in life where hindsight's always, oh, I didn't realize how good I had it back then. I didn't realize how good I had it back then. All you're ever thinking about for medical devices is regulatory clearance. From day one of you starting a company, that's the summit of Everest as you saw it there, right? But then once you get there, the clouds part and you realize there's a much higher, much more complicated peak that is commercialization. So the moment you're commercial, people are going to judge you every single day. The hospitals are judging you every single case. A physician's judging you based on the performance. And then anybody that's potentially looking at you for acquisition is looking at your traction. And traction's at that early point is measured day to day, week to week, month to month. And everybody expects to see some insane hockey stick. And so commercialization was the most, and still remains the most challenging because it never stops. Commercialization was the most, and still remains the most challenging because it never stops. There's no perfect recipe. That's just a static recipe you apply. Even now, as we have been acquired, like we're still constantly thinking about the strategy towards sales and refinement of messaging. Like, and it's the most expensive too. For me, the learning of how to manage people, because now it's people that maybe not necessarily are used to the startup life, right? They have families, they have careers, they expect a 401k, they want health insurance. I was like, we didn't have health insurance until then. It was a completely different ball game in all aspects of the company.
Is it luck or effort building a medical device company?
Both, as it probably should be, right? I always think about what can I control? I can control aspects of R&D, I can control aspects of our cash burn, I can control when and how I engage with strategics or potential acquirers or things like that. What I can't control is certain aspects of timing, right? Like the stock market goes a little sideways, and then now publicly traded companies are like, hey, we're putting all M&A discussion on hold. So you learn some hard lessons that way where like you think it's going one direction, and then in 5 seconds or 5-minute Zoom calls, something can completely vaporize. And that's why like I think most founders don't sleep very much, because you have to be a little bit neurotic and distrustful of a process like the entire time until it's done. So I drove super hard first 2 years to figure out the right strategy to show, hey, if we put a sales rep in this city, this is what that one rep can do. Like, they're not going to generate millions in revenue, it's going to make it profitable, anything like that, but to show that I can replicate, and I have a playbook that says, this is how you train a rep, and if you put them in the city in this duration of time, they have the potential to reach X. And then we have a team of 4 sales reps. They can't even, with 4, keep the lights on for the whole company. We're still operating at a loss. But bigger company, you have 15, you have 100, you have 200 reps. Then you can do the math, and you can see why this is a potential. As a small company, I realized like we don't have a lot of levers, right? You can tell a big company whatever you want, be like, hey, I got a lot of interest. They'll be like, yeah, whatever. Like, they don't care until it's push come to shove. So I knew that I needed to use something or somebody bigger than me, and that's why we brought on an investment bank. So I used an investment bank as the tool to first sift out all the tire kicking companies. The moment it's actually a big bank coming in and saying, there's a lot of interest in allotrope. So they engaged us. They want to formalize the process, and here's the timeline. If it's a bank telling them that, and the bank probably already sold companies to them, like, they know you're not wasting time. I've never worked a corporate job in my life. There was a lot of adjustment, probably more for me than for my team. The sales team, most of them had worked for big medical device companies. For me, it was trying to figure out where I fit, in all honesty. I would say the first 3 months were just trying to figure out what was my voice in the company, right? Because before, not like I made any unilateral decisions, but like, I steered the ship, right? And I was very used to doing that. So we should do this, and I'm going to provide the board the reason why, but we're going to do it. right? And now it's, oh, StimSite's like mine, and they're asking me about stuff, but they also have the commercial lead that's like doing these things, and oh, they have a marketing department that's like doing these like pushes online or doing the conferences. So trying to figure out where I fit in to all that was the next kind of learning for me.